We are really grateful to have so many of you from all around the world. I can see as I'm looking at our participants list that we have folks joining from really everywhere today. So thank you for being with us. My name is Hannah Neuschwander. I am the Senior Advisor for Communications for World Coffee Research, and I am really, really excited to have with me an excellent panel today to talk about future-proofing the farm. De-risking the coffee renovation with climate intelligence. We are going to hear today from a wonderful group of people about the topic of coffee renovation and climate change, how and why we need to accelerate the adoption of new varieties in our supply chains and in the countries where we are sourcing coffee or where we are producing coffee. I'm going to dive right in because we have a really packed hour with a big group of wonderful panelists. Maeve, if you could go to the next slide. For those of you that don't know us, World Coffee Research is an agricultural research organization that is co-funded by 200 coffee companies in 30 countries around the world. You can see some of them here. And together they are investing in driving forward a global collaborative model of agricultural research to secure diverse supplies of coffee from around the world. And it is our member companies that make work like, webinars like this possible, and also work like the Café Klima platform that we're going to be sharing later today possible. So thank you to all our members and to those of you from our member companies that are joining today. Next slide. Real quick, before I dive in, I want to let everyone know that we are recording the webinar and we will make it publicly available on our website and our YouTube channel after the fact. And you'll get a follow-up link to the video as well. So I am very pleased to have with me today a wonderful group of panelists, speakers who are going to help me talk about this big topic, de-risking coffee renovation. We know that decisions made today about what trees go into farms, about how those farms are run, will determine supply availability for the next 20 to 30 years. As much as possible, we need to be planting trees today that can survive the climate volatility that we know not only is coming, but has actually already arrived. One of the things we like to say at WCR is that a tree planted today is like a contract with the climate of 2050. Most coffee trees stay in the ground for anywhere from 15 to sometimes as many as 100 years, depending on where you are. So it really matters what those trees are and what they're able to handle. We also know that renovation is an excellent climate resilience tool. And when I say renovation, I mean the removal of old trees and the planting of new ones, or the planting of basically the planting of new trees. But it is costly and it can be very risky. So it is often an underutilized tool for climate adaptation. We also know that as a sector, we have a huge, huge need. There are billions of coffee trees that are around the world that can endure the climates of the future. And we need to get them in the ground sooner than later. But we need to reduce the risk of making those investments. Governments, companies, farmers are spending, together millions of dollars to secure future supply. It's a big capital deployment and it demands rigorous risk management. The only thing, more expensive when you're doing large scale renovation, especially, the only thing more expensive than doing nothing is doing the wrong thing. So if we are investing in planting millions of trees that can't survive the climate of 2040, we haven't just lost the capital involved in, procuring those trees and getting them into the ground. We've lost a decade of climate sector adaptation. So renovation is critical. That it's not the only thing that we as a sector need to do to adapt and prepare for climate change, but it is a really important action. And I'm really excited to bring some multiple perspectives from our panel about the topic today, and then to also show you a new decision support platform called Café Klima that was co-created between WCR and the Alliance for Bioversity, CIAT, that integrates climate modeling from CIAT with real-world variety performance data from WCR's large variety performance trial called the IMLVT, or the International Multi-Location Variety Trial. It's bringing together these two significant kind of data sets, data platforms, to offer practical, science-based, data-driven insight to help choose better adapted varieties and strengthen our replanting strategies. So it's been kind of like a 10-year journey to create this platform. We're very excited to share it with you and preview it for you today. And also to have a larger conversation about what renovation is, why it matters, and why we need it. So that is going to kick off from I've only had one cup of coffee, friends. It's early in the morning in Portland. That leads me to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Christian Bunn. He is an associate scientist at the Alliance for Biodiversity and CIAT. He is one of the world's foremost experts on coffee and climate change. If you have ever heard that the land suitable for coffee production could be halved by 2050 due to climate change, you have heard of Christian's work. In just a second, he's going to talk to us a little bit about what we know today about climate change and the impact that it's going to have on coffee. Then we're going to hear from Dr. Santos Barrera from WCR. Maybe just give a little wave, guys, when I say your name so people know who's who. And he's going to talk to us about what performance data tells us about what varieties can and also what they can't do, and how we can use that data to inform real-world decision making. We're going to hear from Paul Stewart from TechnoServe. He's the coffee director there. Many of you know him. He is going to help us define the scope of the need and some of the challenges around, how we get many new trees in the ground, and the case for investing in R&R. Then we're going to hear from Nadia Horaru Muara from JDE Pete's Sustainability Director, who's going to bring us down to earth with discussion of how renovation and replanting programs in supply chains actually often look, what some of the risks are and how they work. And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. We're going to try to get to audience questions. We have a large panel, so we'll do our best. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we will do our best to sift and elevate them, or if we're not able to respond afterwards. So with that, I am going to pass things off to Christian to talk to us a little bit about climate modeling and what we know about impacts on coffee of climate change so far. Take it away, Christian, and Maeve, next slide.
Right. Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure. I had a brief look at the participants list, and I'm excited to see so many friends and colleagues in the audience. Just let us just directly go into the background of all of this. As Hannah already introduced, a few years back, our first World Coffee Research collaboration resulted in these maps of agroecological zones for coffee production, and there are often and how these zones would shift under future projection. So if you give it another click, you can see some of this area shrinking. Maybe you could just, So then you see that depending on where you are and what your ecological conditions are, your climatic conditions are, the areas for coffee may be more or less at risk. Now, this was never meant to be a warning. We wanted to understand which areas, what's causing this shift in areas as a call to action. What can we do? And the easiest insight, the most obvious insight, is that Arabica is most at risk where it's already environmentally stressed. And if you go into the publication, you will read that what we're asking for is a systematic evaluation and expansion of the environmental limits for Arabica production to prepare for these future conditions. And a key finding was that research and the way we plan our research itself needs to adapt to climate change, not just the producers. So now, next slide, please. 10 years later, well, climate change is no longer a distant future, and we can see signals of climate change in all our observations across all regions. So just randomly picked the Kenya example here to show this. You can see temperatures going up across all regions, across all seasons, during driest quarter, through the entire year. During the coldest months, temperatures go up. For precipitation, the picture is more mixed. We do see increases in precipitation in both the driest and wettest quarter here in Kenya. If you look at other countries, you will see more of a diverging evolvement of precipitation, dry season getting drier, wet season getting wetter, but this really depends on the region. It's site specific, which makes adaptation sometimes a little bit complex. So next slide, please. So what we spend our last couple of years on is to develop this Acclimatar tool to make all of these insights available so that those people who plan adaptation interventions get access to these to the climate data, analyze which direction of change they have to confront and which are potential solutions that can be implemented together with the communities in the region to confront and adapt, confront climate change and adapt. So it's a planning tool, and we have some training tools there. But all of this was thinking of an existing coffee systems and what can a currently producing farmer do. And so far, we left out the question of variety change, which is, of course, the most important decision a producer has to take during the productive lifetime. And with this, I would like to hand over to Santos. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Christian. If you all have not checked out the Acclimatar platform, I highly, highly recommend it. Maeve just dropped the link in the chat for you all. It's an incredibly powerful tool for looking at climate adaptation practices. As Christian just said, it didn't include varieties. And so the Acclimatar platform is actually what originally inspired Cafe Klima. And Cafe Klima is in fact sort of built on top of the same engine. The project originated, which we're going to show it to you a little bit later, with my colleague, Dr. Santos Barrera. He is one of our lead breeders at WCR. His title is Research Scientist, Plant Breeding and Genomics. That's what fancy title for breeder. And he is the one who saw the potential to integrate variety performance data from our international multi-location variety trial into this climate modeling framework that CIAT had built. So in addition to amazing ideas like this one, he also oversees our Innovea Arabica breeding network, in which 11 countries that together produce 40% of the world's coffee are participating. And we are now setting up kind of the next generation of large variety performance trials to test this next generation of new materials that will be flowing into supply chains over the coming decades. So I'm going to turn it over now to Santos to talk to you a little bit about what varieties can do and what we've learned.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Christian. So as you heard from Christian, with the collaboration with CIAT, we evaluated all of the climatic variables, but we didn't account for the varieties. So varieties matter. So choosing the right variety is not just a technical detail. It's the most powerful tool we have for farmer resilience and supply security. Here's the reality. We have, as you can see in this slide, we have farmers that usually have all of this on the left side of the slide, all varieties that are low producing varieties, disease susceptible varieties, but we need actually varieties that can stand climatic variables. But not only can stand climatic variables, but also produce more and with high quality. But this is not about looking backwards. It's about looking what we can do in the next 20 years. Basically, predicting what we can plant today will be harvested in the coming 10, 20 years. Next slide, please. So how we come up with better varieties that are disease resistant, varieties that are with higher quality. So basically what we have done is we have planted multiple of those different varieties across multiple environments. And here's what we have to use data-driven insights to predict climate-smart performance information. What we can do here is basically wait until the climate comes and tells us if the variety is resilient or not, or we can just take the variety and put in the climate that it looks like the future. And that's what we have done in the IMLBT. We planted different varieties in different locations with higher temperatures, cooler environments, wetter environments, and drier environments. That has helped us to define what are the varieties that perform the best in those specific conditions. We can see that we can wait, as I said, for the climate to come to the tree, or we can put the trees to the different climates. That's what we have done with the IMLBT. By growing all of these different varieties across all of these different environments, we can predict what tomorrow's future climate will impact in today's trees. And that's helped us to compress 30 years of risk data into just a few years of trials. And that's what we are essentially seeing here. We can see that the future, how the varieties will perform in the future without waiting to see 30 years from now. Next, please. So, but this is a story about the power of genetics and the power of breeding. So our IMLBT global data has shown us that variety do matter. Basically, in this graph, we can see that the power of breeding, as you can see in this graph on the left side of the panel, color-coded as red, those are basically all varieties that have been for many years in multiple coffee growing regions, and they are underperforming in these trials. On the other hand, on the right side of the slide, we can see newer varieties that we call F1 varieties with newer breeding pipelines that are performing well in these IMLB trials. We can see that some of the varieties are even performing above 50% in comparative yield production with all varieties. So what we can see again is that choosing the right variety for the right environment is important. So another important aspect that we identify with our IMLBT is that we identify varieties that are stable. What does that mean? Stable means that varieties that can be planted in multiple environments and will perform well. One of those is, for instance, IPR 103. That's one of the most stable varieties that we identify in this IMLBT. On the other hand, we can identify varieties that are more adaptable and suitable for specific sites. For instance, I think in the previous talk, Christian mentioned about the Mount Elgon that is getting hotter and hotter. So we have identified some varieties that are suitable for warmer climates. For instance, H1 Centroamericano and Marsellesa. So here is the importance of coming together with the expertise of our colleagues from CIAT, plus the expertise of all of these learnings from 10 years of variety performance. We have built this tool to show the powers of genetics and the variety matters, and we can select best varieties for future environments. And with that, I think I'm going to pass to next speaker.
Thank you so much, Santos. So we're going to turn now to Paul Stewart from TechnoServe. We've heard about, climate change is we know it's already putting a lot of pressure on production environments. We know that varieties and better varieties have the possibility to help us respond. One of the challenges is getting them to farmers. Paul Stewart thinks about these things all day long in his role as coffee director for TechnoServe, where he works on and helps lead programs that reduce poverty for farmers while also developing sustainable supply chains for coffee businesses, the shared value model. So Paul oversees a portfolio of partnerships with some of the world's leading coffee companies and foundations and public sector agencies. to increase coffee income of farmers across Africa and Latin America. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about some recent work that TechnoServe did to try to quantify why we need to make these investments and how we unlock them, and what some of the value is that they are capable of creating. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and great to be among so many great coffee friends. So as Hannah mentioned, last year we published a report called the Regenerative Coffee Investment Case, and it was a study which looked at a number of different aspects of regenerative coffee investment. We undertook this study with the support of partners like Nestle and JD Peet's. And we worked with experts, and one of the first things we did was to work with experts in 9 of the key coffee growing countries around the world to identify the proven practices that will help to regenerate soils, improve the water cycle, and increase biodiversity and climate resilience. And as we pulled together all this information from these very different countries, one particular practice really came to the top as being the most important that farmers really need to apply around the world, which is rejuvenation or renovation, where farmers would be replacing their coffee trees. Now, it's important everywhere. There are 2 countries where it's already done pretty well, Brazil and Vietnam. Farmers do this very well, but in the other countries, it's a big priority and a big need for farmers to invest, but obviously a lot of challenges for them to do that. One of the most important questions that we asked in this study was if adoption of these practices can benefit farmer incomes and nature, because often we're concerned, things that might benefit farmer incomes may not be good for nature and vice versa. So this was one of the really critical questions we asked. If we go to the next slide. I think the great surprise, perhaps, for even us as we undertook this study was that across all of the countries, overwhelmingly, what we saw was that as farmers adopt regenerative practices, it is good for the economy, it's good for farmers, and it's good for nature. In terms of exports, we saw that particularly across 7 countries, so that's all of the countries you saw on the map, excluding Brazil and Vietnam, adopting regenerative practices will increase exports for the country. In terms of farmer incomes, we saw that over 3 million coffee farms could experience an average increase of income of over 60%. That's a huge increase, and the variety of increases is really quite incredible, with some farmers in some parts of the world able to achieve more than double, sometimes even tripling their yields as a result of adopting these practices. In terms of nature, we were really only able to quantify the impact on greenhouse gas emissions, and we found that adopting these practices was able to reduce coffee emissions by about 38% across 2.7 million coffee hectares. If we go to the next slide. But adopting these practices has a big cost. Now, while the income that will be generated far exceeds the cost, the total investment cost required is about $4 billion over 7 years. And that can be split into 2 broad categories of expenses. So the largest is farmer capital. And farmer capital, one of the most critical areas that needs investment is the cost of renovation. And obviously there are many aspects of that renovation cost. It's not just purchasing the seedlings. It's not just the cost of removing the trees and preparing the land to replant. but it's also a huge cost of giving up income for 3 years as the new seedlings are growing. Some farmers are able, obviously, to reduce that time by top working, grafting onto their existing trees, which is a very good practice that we see farmers in places like Kenya do very effectively, and that can reduce the time that farmers are losing their income. But it's a huge investment that farmers need to make. And in addition to that, there's a cost of technical assistance. We're obviously here focused today on talking about the adoption of which varieties are required. That is one example of very important information that farmers need to know. What varieties do they need to plant? But also many farmers who have never renovated their farms before actually need to learn some of the important practices around how to actually plant their seedlings and how to take care of them when they're young. So there are many aspects to technical assistance. Obviously, these costs and investments look very different across each of the countries, and unfortunately, we don't have time to kind of break that down by country right now. But there's a QR code and a link has been shared where you can download the report. So not only the overall report, but there are also country-specific reports. And you're able to see on a per farmer basis how much investment is required, and also even at a country level how much investment is required for all the different aspects of renovation and the other investments that farmers need to make to regenerate their coffee farms. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think Paul did a great job of giving us this big picture up at 30,000 feet of what it takes to bring more renovation and rehabilitation down to farmers. We're going to come down to earth a little bit for a minute with Nadia Horaru Moara, JDE's sustainability director, JDE Pete's sustainability director, to talk about how often this type of work actually gets implemented on the ground. Very often it is implemented through projects that are funded by roasters that help them address sustainability in their own supply chains. And Nadia has worked on many of these projects, the design and implementation of farmer impact and regenerative agriculture programs in the JDE Pete's supply chain all around the world. And again, really working with that through that lens of driving shared value for both farmers and business. So this is where a lot of the work actually gets done. And we're going to turn now to Nadia to hear a little bit about the opportunities, the challenges, and the risks that projects like these face. I'm going to give it over to you, Nadia. Take it away.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone, and it's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be amongst coffee friends. So if I think about unpacking this, and I just have the one slide there with the picture, because I always think pictures speak louder than words. I don't have any text. I'm just going to walk you through this and our thought process. I'll start with why is JDE Pete's investing in world coffee research? It's simple. We need coffee R&D. It's under-resourced to date, and you've heard everyone speaking, starting with Christian. Climate change, pests, diseases are real. Diseases are intensifying, pests are intensifying. We're seeing it along our supply chain and along the farmers that we're sourcing from. The varieties that we have today, we've heard it again, they're aging and are poorly adapted. Just think about it in very simple terms. An average farmer who has planted their coffee, probably planted that coffee tree between 10 to 20 years ago. The climate then was very different. Look at those models that we saw with Kenya and rising temperatures. I can guarantee you 20 years ago, the rainfall patterns were not as they were now in Mount Elgon as it was 20 years ago. So whatever was put in the ground then was not ready to handle these climatic conditions and also to withstand whatever pests and diseases are coming their way. And all in all, the other reason we're doing it is we're a coffee roaster. All we do is coffee. We need lots and lots of coffee to be able to, produce, sell the coffee that we sell, the different brands and the lovely cups of coffee that everybody drinks every morning. I hope you've had yours today. I for sure have had several. And the farmer productivity, apart from a few countries that have focused clear coffee strategies as a national agenda, productivity is declining, and there is a risk of global supply. So if we don't do something now, and not just let's think about what we want to do, let's base it on science and on evidence. Therefore, we need coffee R&D. So that's the simple term as to why we need WCR, who offers a global platform for R&D collaboration. Anyone can join. You saw there's over 200 companies that are members of it. And it's the work that we see Santos presenting and that was talked about just now that actually is a result of all of the contribution of all the companies that are involved and has helped all of the years of research to translate into what we have today. So what do we do then? We then get practical. So there's the R&D piece of work, but then how can we engage as a roaster? One of the ways is, for example, the program in Peru. There is this amazing program that we are working together with other partners, led by WCR, to help scale seed lots for all of the healthy seedlings that are needed in Peru. And this is tested and verified through the IMLVT process, because we've talked about the seedlings, the varieties that we all need, all of these great ones that perform, but all of these great genetics are not helpful if the farmers cannot actually get them. Mm-hmm. And we all know on the ground, it's very difficult to make sure that there are nurseries and seed systems in direct availability of farmers wherever they are, up the mountain, down in the valley, with the road structures and infrastructure that you have. So if we don't put out these seed systems out for farmers to be able to access, we have a problem. And farmers have a problem because they can't get the right stuff that they need. And what's really great is this is not speculative. It is really evidence-based, field-proven testing that is going to work and support the farmers. And that's why we're also investing in this, along with other programs that we're investing with WCR in Honduras and in Uganda. But in Peru, it's super exciting to be able to play a role, to be able to help the farmers access these high-performing varieties, so that we at the end and others who are in the supply chain have access to supply, quality, and grades that we need at the time that we need them. Another thing that we are doing as JDPs is we continue to invest in our farmer programs. Last year, we celebrated 10 years of our program, where we've reached over 1 million farmers, which is it's been a journey and a lot of learnings along the way. Over 7.2 million disease-resistant varieties have been distributed to farmers. But what is really, really important, and I think, Paul, you alluded to this, renovation only succeeds when it is embedded in a really practical regenerative package. Mm-hmm. You need to have the quality of the nursery, the soil, the shade, the gap practices that the farmer needs to put into it. And increasingly, we're seeing this transition cost, the finance that will help the farmers to go over the next level. So what else can we talk about then in terms of the future of renovation? So if I think about where we're looking at in the next few years, what do we need to focus on? I think we need to think of I think it was Christian, you talked about it, the call to action with the CIAT piece of work. It's in the essence of what we also do at WCR, and I'm wearing two hats here as a member of WCR and as a roaster. We can only do this if we all come together, and if we all realize that if we do it right now, then we're going to make a proper difference, as opposed to doing, ad hoc interventions here and there. We really need to come together, treat this as something of utmost priority, and plan long-term. Renovation is a long-lived asset. When a farmer puts in that plant into the ground, He or she wants a thriving, resilient, high productive coffee tree that is going to be able to provide towards their livelihoods for the next 15 to 20 years. So let's make sure that we're using evidence-based systems, science-based systems to be able to do this. I think what else we need to be able to do, and why we do this as a roaster together with others, is we need playbooks like this. This is super exciting to be able to see. How do we work with systems that help us all? Because this, my dear friends, is not a competitive space. I speak openly as a roaster. This is not a place where we should be competing with each other, because we all need the coffee. The nuances come later on when you have your sourcing schemes and you have your different cupping and your different qualities and grades. What we all need is coffee. And this is something that we need to work at as a pre-competitive level. And then I think I'll just repeat the last thing again. We need, and it was you, Hannah, who said it, we need to have the right tree in the right place. And I think what was missing and what we all need to emphasize is with the right support and access to finance, to transition for the farmers. If we do this together, we can actually make renovation an informed decision for farmers and for roasters and traders along the way, rather than a leap of faith, because now we can actually have the science and the scale to be able to do that. Because as we all know, that, in order to do this, we can have all of the playbooks and the platforms. A farmer does what they do because they see, and seeing is believing. And if they see that the tree can and will grow and will produce, Paul was talking a little bit about that. Once one farmer sees the success of his or her neighbor, we'll be able to replicate it. So now is the time, and I think we have the momentum to do so. So I'm super excited to be part of this journey.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for that. And I think one of the last points you were making was about the need for science-based tools as much as possible to help inform, especially larger, riskier decisions and investments. And that is what we are so excited to show you today, as one small piece that contributes to that. The large $4 billion number that Paul mentioned about the need for R&R that's a big comprehensive number that encompasses a lot of things that we know that we need to do as a sector in order to shift toward a regenerative agriculture model. It includes replanting with new trees, what we call renovation. It includes rehabilitating farms with older trees, top working, pruning. So it's training farmers. It's a big number. The thing that I'm going to show you now, our new Cafe Klima platform, really addresses a part of this puzzle, right? It is about making planting decisions for new plantings, or replacing old trees with new things. But we're very excited about it, as small as it may be, because it does something that it hasn't been possible before. It takes these two data sets that have basically been kind of locked up in kind of academic research in our own computer systems here at WCR, and it brings them together, integrates them into a single place, and lets you see and have insight into how different varieties are performing, not just today, but also in the future. So next slide, please, Maeve. As I said at the top of the webinar, this was a collaboration between WCR and CIAT. It was funded by WCR member companies, so thank you all for helping make that possible, and also a little bit through the MOCA program, which has now retired. It is a science-based engine for the platform is all about helping support decision-making for planting climate-smart varieties. Next slide, please, Maeve. We really envision that it is going to be directly most useful for agronomists and extensionists, and maybe also technified farmers. As you'll see in a second, the platform is a little bit technical, so it is not necessarily for for every single farmer. But for those who are helping support decision-making around what trees might be planted in a new location, it also will help support design teams and funders of renovation programs to feel like they have some solidity in the decisions that are being made around larger scale planting programs. And it can also be used by researchers. I think there was a question in the chat earlier about, how do you select sites for trialing new varieties or existing varieties to make sure that they are relevant for future climates. This tool helps you do that. It's an exciting side use, so you can reach out to us for support with that. And yeah, it is really just designed to help give insight into your current climate location, what the climate is doing now, what it might do in the future, and then what varieties might be relevant for that location. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to take a quick look. There is a QR code here to the tutorial videos. So if you want to have access to those, they're also linked in the FAQ on the platform itself. Let me very quickly get over here to share my screen. And we are going to put this into full screen. Welcome to Cafe Klima. I'm going to give you a quick tour. We're going to, since we've been talking about Kenya, I think we're going to just go ahead and stick with that and select a location from our drop-down menu. You can also put a GPS location in here. Once the page loads, you'll see a map. The areas in blue are those for which we can show you more specific variety recommendations. The ones in orange, we don't. So if you click on an orange one, you can still see global data, global average data from the whole IMLVT trial across the whole world, but it won't be location specific. I'm going to go ahead and pick a location over here, right there, kind of near Mount Elgon. Once you have selected your location, if you want to, you can give it a name and you can save it. You create a login and save it, and then you can have a backlog of all of the locations that you've saved. There's also a way to upload multiple locations with an Excel spreadsheet once you create an account and log in. And then once you're here, you have a number of options to look at the climate parameters for this location, what variety performance is get some variety performance insight for your specific location, and then also look at global data. So first we'll go into the climate view. This is very similar to the Acclimatar platform. If you have looked at that before, you might recognize some of this. What you can see is expected future, past, present, and future climate information for precipitation, for temperature, and then also for the different risks associated with climate change. For every part of the site, there are little pop-out windows that tell you a little bit more about the parameters and that define the terms that we're using. So you can always use those to learn a little bit more. You can go see a suitability map. Some of you might recognize the kind of look of this from other work that CIAT has done. It's pretty cool. So you can see what areas are expected to be suitable, have been suitable in the past. And also if you click then on future, you'll be able to see how that changes for the future. And when I say future, we're basically using a kind of composite of different climate models and many factors to say, what the world looks like in a climate change future. I think it's RCP 6.5. It starts getting very technical, but it's something like a, plus 2 degrees Celsius future. That is what future means in this system. You can get a lot more details in the methodology section of the page. You can also then look at the impact gradient. So this is something that CIAT has built that helps you see, like, is this area one where we expect that we can make small incremental adaptations and it will remain suitable, where we maybe need transformational adaptation. So something like really significant change of the crops that you're producing, and then not suitable would be like we're just really probably not going to be able to grow coffee here in the future, regardless of what adaptations you make on your farm. once we get through the climate data, you can come over to the climate analogs tab, and this is where you're going to see your variety performance information. So what the tool does is it looks to our international multi-location variety trial network. This network has it had 28 sites in 18 countries, very representative of lots of different kinds of climates. That was the map that Santos showed you, the kind of color map of the world that had the little dots on it. Those were all the sites. What it does is it looks at the location that you've selected, and then it goes out to that network of sites and says which of those sites around the world is most similar, has a climate that is most similar to the site where you have selected. And then it's going to show you how varieties performed at that similar site, the analog site or the climate twin site. So here we can see that we have yield data for the site that is in South Kivu, Rwanda, which makes sense that this is the most similar site. It's actually very close to the site we selected. It's just pretty much across the border. And we can see that we have a variety called S795 has about 50% higher performance than average. So that might be a really good option for your farm if that's where you're at. Santos mentioned that globally, one of the varieties that was most stable across all environments, if you took all of the different sites and all the different varieties and averaged them, IPR 103 was the most stable. But here's a great example of how, a broadly stable variety might, in a specific location, it still might not be the best. So here at this particular location, which is expected to get hotter, this is not as good as one of the options over here. So you can take a close look at all of that. You can also then see how your specific location climate compares with the analog climate from the IMLDT trial, just so you can get a feel for like, well, how similar, how different is it really? There are other sites that are maybe a little bit less similar in descending order that you can pop out and check. And then if you would like to, you can go to the Variety Explorer, which is up here in this next tab, which gives you the global average productive performance. So across all sites and all varieties, which ones did better and worse. And you can also see rust data for the different varieties. And the reason that we put this in the global section and not in the local section is that not all races of rust are available in all parts of the world. And if we showed you rust performance for just one site, it would potentially miss, like it might look like it was resistant to rust, but in fact it was just that the race that it's susceptible to wasn't present in that location. So we only show rust in the global area, but this is also something important to consult. On any one of these graphs, you can click onto the variety name and get a deeper look at variety performance, as well as a link to the WCR variety catalog page that shows them. You can go at the bottom of any of these pages to the next steps page, which gives you a little more contextual information about considerations and best practices for selecting varieties and for planting varieties, for obtaining high quality plants, and links to many other resources that are supportive of renovating, including some guides for nurseries about how to produce those healthy plants that WCR has produced over the years. Like I said, you can log in, you can save all of your work, and I encourage you all to jump in and play around. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And we're going to, oh, Maeve, can you go to the next slide? I just wanted to acknowledge that this platform was involved a huge amount of work from a huge number of people, a big team of data scientists from Bioversity and CIAT, also from World Coffee Research, the folks that have worked for many years with our IMLVT trial. I want to acknowledge all of the partners in that trial. We had, as I mentioned, 28 sites or 29 sites in 18 countries. All of those individual sites were managed by partners, mostly national coffee institutions in those countries. They collected all the data. They took care of the trees. So truly, this is a global effort that spans a decade, and we're so excited that we can bring some of the fruit of that labor forward and make it into a public, accessible, actionable tool for science-based insight and decision making. Maybe next slide. Okay, so we are gonna turn now to a little bit of a panel discussion, a little bit of back and forth. We have about 10 minutes left. So if you have questions, feel free to email us at info@worldcoffeeresearch.org. Maybe we'll drop that in the thing. I'm guessing we're probably not going to get to audience Q&A. We're just going to go through a couple of questions for the panel, but we will do our best to answer any unanswered questions that we can by email. And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Christian. What else do we need to know to more effectively prepare or adapt for coffee, to adapt coffee for climate change? Like, what are the gaps in our knowledge? What are the limitations? What do you think is the biggest thing that needs to be addressed now?
Right. So most farmers are really concerned about the resilience of their livelihoods, which often depend on short-term shocks. So varieties, of course, need to be resilient to the long-term future, but we also have to work much better on this shock preparedness and develop climate services so that producers can prepare for unusual seasonal events and do the financial planning or get their activities planned ahead of the shock that's about to evolve.
That's such a great point. It's like one thing to talk about incremental 0.1% per year increase in temperature, but that's not really what pushes a farmer out of farming. It's a severe drought year.
It's an up and down, and we need to understand, is the shock we're seeing in line with the projection and what we expect in the long term, and how do we in all of this unfolding mess not forget the future outlook to prepare for the coming 10 years or 20 years future.
Santos, maybe a similar question to you. What needs to change to enable farmers to access high quality new varieties? What is it that we need to focus our attention on now when it comes to variety development and deployment?
That's a good question. Actually, what farmers need is more options. So we can see that in the platform, there are only a few options. The first thing that they need to know is there are available varieties that might perform well in the places where they are located. If there is availability, then what? We have to have more options. We have to have more varieties, and that's what we are working on WCR, on providing different options for farmers in different sites. And that's what farmers need, options and availability for those of those varieties in the places where they need to grow them.
Paul, similar theme. What other actions do you think we need to create more incentive to increase investment in R&R? You flagged a $4 billion gap there. That's a big gap. How do we fill it?
Yeah, I think we have to start by demonstrating that we have the solution, and I think this tool we've seen today is part of that. But there are other ways that we can present, the solution, show people that this has been tried and tested. We have the results, and frankly, I think most importantly, seeing is believing. Getting people out to the field. Nadia talked about this. Going and walking on a field and talking to a farmer and hearing that farmer tell how not just their coffee farm has completely changed, but how their lives have completely changed. And I just think of some great examples recently of my colleagues taking some government officials in Ethiopia to visit some farmers and letting the farmers just do the talking and explaining and showing what they've done. And those government officials, walked away completely converted and really believing in regenerative coffee farming and really believing that investment is needed and where it's needed.
Thank you. Nadia, what do you see as the future of renovation? Speak from your own lens as a roaster that invests in programs like this, partnerships, planning horizons, investment priorities, using tools like this. How does it look different different in 5 or 10 years than it does now?
I think already now, so we often like to paint the picture of doom and gloom in coffee, right? But when you go out into the field, there is a lot of good work that's happening in different programs across different roasters, TechnoServe, others. There's a lot of good work going on. I think that what we need to do more of is, and that would make, is avoid the duplication of efforts, because we're all going out and doing the studies and figuring out or planting and doing trials and pilots. I think tools like this and global collaborative R&D and examples, or studies like the regen business case work that was done by TechnoServe, are public and available for all of us for a reason, so that we don't go back into our holes and think all over again. So how do we avoid the duplication and really replicate? If there's a model that works, scale it up, let the farmers decide. And this is also very important. The farmer will see the evidence, and if they see the value in doing that, then they will. Because remember, just planting that coffee is not the end of it. You need to then do all of the things that you need to do every year: come in, come out, the cycle, the pruning, the mulching, the fertilization, the weeding. All of that has to come in place. So it's really supporting each other and avoiding the duplication and going with the winners. And I think we can do that. We've seen evidence of it happening in some of the programs we're doing.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our closing question to all panelists. Maybe see if you can try to answer in about 30 seconds. I know that's hard. If we succeed, so the original work that kicked all this off back in 2015 was this study by CIAT that showed, decline in suitable lands by half in 2050. If we succeed in creating new varieties, driving investment, implementing regen ag, how does the coffee sector look different in 2050 than it does today? And I'll start with you, Christian.
Right. I'm concerned about our household origins that we tend to trust. We all have our favorite origins, and my concern is that some of these will just go out of business or no longer produce quality coffee. And new origins may appear, especially when farmers do adapt. But it's new origins with new names and new value chains to be developed. And and on top of that, the price uncertainty, the price variability, which then makes climate impacts even worse for many farmers when also there's a market risk evolving.
Santos.
I can see the future where farmers can have multiple options, but also it is a supply security. So not only options in the sites where they can produce different varieties, not only the few varieties that they have available or the seeds that they can get from farmers, but also those that are scientific based, so they can make decisions on what are the varieties that they will plant in their trees. So they will secure the supply for roasters, which at the end is the consumer or consumers in the countries.
Yeah. Paul.
I think East Africa will be a much more important growing region. In particular, Ethiopia and Uganda are going to be powerhouses of coffee in 2050.
Nadia.
I am optimistic for 2050 because I think we all have the right tools. Coffee is an amazingly resilient plant sector. It is, and if we continue to do all the things that we've been talking about today and in other forums, it will look great. And I would love to see East Africa as the true powerhouse. I would be with you, Paul, on this journey. But I'm optimistic because coffee is great and it brings people together, and it's feeding people's livelihoods in all places of the world. If not coffee, what else? So let's get right.
That feels like the perfect period at the end of the sentence. I want to thank you all for joining us so much. If you are not already a WCR member and you are a company that buys coffee or depends on coffee in some way, I really encourage you to join us. You can see more at this QR code. You can follow along on social media. I want to thank our panelists for their time and their expertise. We are so grateful to you for doing this. Please also check out Cafe Klima and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.